All right, so we're on to more summer running. This is our summer running part 2 episode.
It's a series.
It is a series. So last week we had summer running, had me a blast. This week, summer running happened so fast. You guys obviously know we're Grease fans. Well, I should say I'm a Grease fan. I don't know about Kevin.
I've seen the movie.
Is that it?
Yep.
One time?
Maybe.
We've been having this debate on when is appropriate to show Grease to our kids, because there's a lot of
the answer is never.
There's a lot of inappropriate things in Grease, but I know when I watched it as a kid, I didn't catch at least half of the references. I didn't know what any of that stuff meant.
No, I looked up the lyrics to the song Grease Lightning somewhere in my 20s.
Dirty.
I was like, oh God, that's awful.
It's dirty, you guys. It's crazy.
Really bad.
I know. So today in part 2 of summer running, we want to talk. Well, so if you caught last week we talked about running in the heat, specifically the heat and humidity. We touched a little bit about dry heat, but we know more about running in humidity because we live in South Florida, and Kevin ran for a good chunk of his life out in California. So you've got the experience. So we covered a lot about running in the summer months, especially with heat and humidity, and how that affects you in all ways. So if you missed that one, go back and catch part 1. You don't need to listen to part 1 before you listen to that, because they are basically separate things. They're just kind of connected with this thread of the summer. But what we want to talk about in today's episode is how our schedules are often affected during the summer, and how we can adjust our schedules and how we can adjust our mindset around our running in order to accommodate for those schedule and routine changes in the summer. Because especially if you have kids, you understand that the summer is not like the rest of the year.
No, not at all. And so much of exercise and most of our fitness and health routine is just that. It's a routine, which means it's rooted in habits.
Right.
And habits have first I do this, and then this naturally follows. First I have a cup of coffee, then I go to the bathroom, and then I'm off on my run. And you're like, oh, I have a cup of coffee, and now my kids are awake and not going to school. And the whole routine can get completely thrown.
It
and
does.
Maybe you take a vacation in there. You got to figure out, how do I deal with this? Because you don't necessarily have the same habit cues, and your routine could get completely upended.
Yeah. And I don't think that everyone consciously realizes this. They don't understand.
I did not.
Yeah. How powerful our routines are, just our normal daily routine or weekly routine when people are in school, or Kevin is a teacher. And so when he has his normal school schedule, his summer schedule, Kevin teaches a summer school class, but that schedule is still different than it is the rest of the school year.
Yeah, I start later, I end earlier, and my lunch is totally different, which I did not realize was going to cause a problem until I started trying to run in the afternoon after my summer school class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because my lunch is 30 to 45 minutes later, which is 30 to 45 minutes less digesting than I would normally have.
Yeah, so little things like that, we might not realize how much that affects us. And so today we want to kind of go over exactly how those things may affect you, and then what you can do about it. Because a lot of times we see people that have goals, especially if you are someone that has a fall race that is trying to train through the summer. Things can get a little sticky and a little complicated if they're not dealt with correctly. And oftentimes in the summer, people take vacations, and vacations are fantastic. And we definitely promote rest and recovery and enjoy your family vacation, but they can cause problems when you may have unrealistic or unspoken expectations. So what do I mean by that? Number one would be trying to fit everything in as if that vacation doesn't even exist.
Yes, I think that falls under the unrealistic expectations umbrella there.
Or the opposite end of things, which is ignoring your training schedule, ignoring everything about your running routine and your fitness because you're on vacation.
Right, which could be fine. That could be completely acceptable, except if you come back off of that and now you're angry that you have completely fallen off of your routine because you went on vacation. It wasn't recovery. It wasn't restful at all because now you're angry about it. So you just have to have the appropriate expectations about what vacation is going to do to your running routine.
Right. Because if you ignore the fact that things are different, that there are changes in your routine, or that you're off on vacation and you're doing something that you're not used to doing, we can become very frustrated with the results that we're getting. Like we see that a lot from people, you know, like they're off and they're frustrated because they're trying to get things in and it's not working out in their schedule. And then they end up getting mad at their family or whoever they're vacationing with, because
look right at me as you say that.
No, I mean, have you ever gotten mad at us?
Totally.
Okay. And tell us more.
I mean, I can't remember the specific details of when this happened, but I guarantee that there have been vacations where I unspokenly had a plan.
And I think that that's the key.
That's what we're going to get into. That's why I didn't want to go too much right now. Like, I kind of want to dive into this a little bit more. But that's part of the issue, is the unspoken expectations. Right. And this is part of, like, we're going to get into this, of there needs to be clear communication between everybody involved in the vacation of what hopes are, reality is, how hopes and reality can kind of blend together, what might need to get pushed aside just a little bit. All important things. Communication is super important around changes in routine. Yeah.
And I think that this is also, you know, like I said, you can end up very frustrated, right? And then there are people also like you that ends up being very accommodating to everyone else's schedule. Sure. Like you in general are a very accommodating person. You're very go with the flow. You don't like to rock the boat. And so oftentimes I think that leads you to just kind of going along with things, even though you might want to do something else, and not speaking those expectations or those desires. And then that would lead to more frustration and maybe even regression on your part.
Right. Depending on how long the routine is thrown for, you could actually regress in your physical ability. Yeah. If you take a couple of days off on like a long weekend,
totally fine.
You could skip it all and you can come back basically 100%.
Right.
But if you miss a few days and you sit there and just stew in your own silent frustration, annoyed at the world around you that you're not getting in the workout that in your head you had planned out, but you hadn't told anybody about.
Right.
I don't know if that has as much physical repercussions, but I feel like stewing in your own frustration has got to be more regressing than just being like, I'm going to have this as an off day.
Yeah.
I feel like the mental has to drain on you just a little bit more.
I completely agree, you know, because like we talk about many times on this podcast, stress is stress. Physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, psychological stress, it's all stress. And so by you kind of stewing in it and feeling frustrated that you're not being able to do what you want to do, that's increasing your emotional stress or your mental stress around all of it too.
Right. So you're not getting any of the recovery that the vacation might actually provide.
I was just about to say, then you're not actually able to enjoy that vacation as much, right? Like, and this is what we want you guys to understand, is that vacations are fantastic. And
yeah, they are.
Vacations, though, they should lead to a change in your plan, possibly, right? I think it's very important for you to go into your vacation. Like Kevin said, there's a lot of different factors that we need to look at here, but you need to go into it with a clear goal for your fitness routine on that vacation. Because if you go in and you don't even think about your fitness routine, that I think is what leads to a lot of like the frustration or the disappointment or the guilt or the shame, right? Like, because then you feel guilty that you're not following your plan, or
and the shame quickly follows. And now you're sitting there and stewing and angry at the world around you.
Exactly. So number one, make a clear goal for your fitness while you're on vacation. And that goal might be, I'm not going to work out on vacation. And that is a totally fine goal to have or expectation to have, as long as you make it consciously.
Yes, you can totally have the I'm not going to work out, or maybe you're used to running 60-minute, like working out 60 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And on vacation, you've decided that you're going to be fine with 30 minutes 3 times over the course of the week. And that's a huge change in your normal workout routine. But you've decided, you know what? It's vacation. I don't want to kind of completely have to try and find a gym somewhere or a trail that I'm not familiar with. I'm going to do this. This is going to be fine. This is my base level, and I will be happy and satisfied with this. But here's the catch. You have to tell other people that. Okay. And I'm going to go with my personal story. We went up to the mountains in Georgia a few years ago. The plan was to run. We had a cabin in the middle of the woods. It was like, this is going to be fantastic. We literally walk out the cabin door. There's going to be trails right there. They were not. There were not clear trails right there. There were
No.
woods, but there was no like trail around, and the roads were not safe because it was twists and turns. There was no shoulder. It was like a one lane twisty turny road. So the closest thing that we could do to run was to probably like drive 20, 30 minutes to a park where there was in fact a clear trailhead. I decided, all right, that's fine. I'm going to shift this and be like, you know what? Vacation's going to be awesome. We're going to do some great hiking. I'm going to wake up in the morning and relax. We're going to have coffee. I'm going to sit on the porch. It's going to be amazing. I failed to tell that to Angie. So you, the whole time, were like, he's got to be upset. Like, I don't know why he's not upset. I think he's hiding that he's upset with this. I thought
you were lying.
Yeah, you thought that I was like, you thought I was stewing. And in my head, I had said, as soon as we got to the cabin, literally as soon as we're unpacking, and I look around, I'm like, okay, so running is out the window. But I didn't express it. So key that you and everybody involved have a clear goal for vacation, and it's expressed to everybody involved.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads us to our second point here of know what is available to you where you are going. Okay. So
good one.
When you decide where you're going on vacation, do your best to try to do some research ahead of time and see what's available to you. Is there a fitness center? Like if you're going somewhere and staying at a hotel, is there a fitness center available to you? Are you near trails where you can run? Are there roads? Do those roads have shoulders or sidewalks next to them? Like figure out what you might have available. And then you can always supplement. You know, if you want to bring, like one of the things that I like to bring with us when we go out on vacation would be like bands that I can get in some strength work.
Easy to put into it.
And then a TRX, like a suspension trainer that I can put over a doorway, and I can do a ton of strength training work with that suspension trainer, and it takes up very little room in my suitcase.
Yeah, those are two very easy to pack. They're not heavy and they don't take up a lot of space, and you can use them anywhere.
And you're only doing this for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how long you're on vacation.
Exactly.
So you're not going to lose a ton of fitness. It's really just about maintaining.
Yes.
Like understanding that my goal during that time is now not to progressively overload my muscles, because in all likelihood, I won't have access to a lot of equipment depending on what's going on. So my goal is just going to be maintenance phase during that week, whatever it might be. Or you could be like me or not. I would not suggest being like me.
This is actually not a recommendation.
When you go to a hotel that has a really nice fitness center that actually has more equipment than I usually have access to at home, like I did on our Thanksgiving vacation a couple years ago. And I got so excited about all of the new equipment and kettlebells and all the things that I completely overdid it in my first strength workout and ended up throwing out my back and then had back pain for the rest of the trip.
Yep.
Don't do that.
Yeah, but you could, like you overdid on like multiple exercises on day one.
And see, this is one of the things, though, I think that vacation brings us to, is it brings us lots of extra time.
And the potential. And that, I mean, that was a great gym.
Yeah.
So I think if you had looked at that and known ahead of time, this is what I've got at my disposal.
Yeah.
You could have ahead of time planned a routine instead of walking into the gym and being like, ooh, like kid in candy store. This was Angie in candy store. You're like, look at the kettlebell. I'm going to swing it over my head while standing on a Bosu ball.
No,
it's not actually what you did.
But I did do kettlebell swings, and I had not done kettlebell swings, that they were not a like normal part of my workout routine for months.
Right. So unclear exactly what weight you should have necessarily been at.
It was less than the one I chose.
Definitely less than what you chose. Like,
so
when you have a new thing, that doesn't mean that you can't use the new thing.
Right.
It just means that you have to ease into the new thing, because new is automatically going to create soreness.
Yes.
You're like, oh, well, it doesn't have the same machines. It doesn't have the same free weights that I'm used to. So I'm going to have to mix it up. I'm going to have to do this instead. Immediately reduce the intensity on strength training, I think, is a safe way to play it.
Yeah.
To see what you've got. If you're on vacation for a couple of weeks, use the first time that you're going to try a strength routine in the new fitness center there as a chance to like ease into it and be like, let's see how the machines are working and how my body feels with these movement patterns.
Yeah. It's so much easier said than done, especially when you love fitness, right? Yeah. Like, and I think that this is what I wanted to point out is that those of us that love fitness and that love running all of a sudden we go on vacation and we don't have our normal schedule. We don't
I've
have,
done this myself.
right?
Yep.
We don't have the normal constraints on our time. We have all of this free time.
Extra time.
And so you're like, sweet, like normally I only can get in 30 minutes, but now I could go out for an hour and a half. I can go out for 2 hours. And this goes with both strength training and with running.
Yep.
Right? We see people that all of a sudden have all this extra time on their hands. They're not limited by, I need to get this workout in before I get to work. So now I have all this time on my hands. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to go on a 5-mile hike. And then I'm also going to go for my run. And then I might also add in some strength training because look at all these amazing things at the gym.
Yeah.
And so then you end up overdoing it. And that, I mean, I've fallen into that trap more than once. And this shows you that even though I'm a coach, even though I know better, I'm still human. And so even though you might listen to this podcast, even though you might be a member of our training academy, and you know this information, sometimes we get a little excited, kind of like kids in a candy store, like you're saying, like, you know, if you eat too much candy, you're going to get a stomach ache. But sometimes the kids still eat all that candy and then ends up with a stomach ache or end up throwing up because of it.
Kid in a candy store, Angie in a fancy fitness center, Kevin at a new trailhead.
Yes.
Like these are places where things can get overdone. When we go out to visit my parents out in California, so it's like, oh, I know these hills.
Oh,
I ran these hills for years.
I love running.
But the problem is I have not run these hills in years. So when I go out, it cannot be hill workout day upon day upon day.
Right.
I would like to try to be on the trails. I love being on the trails instead of, you know, the roads and the sidewalks and whatnot. But if I do a hill loop one day and I want to go back and experience the joy of the hills and the trails again the next day, that second day needs walking breaks that I would not normally do. And normally be like, I'm not taking a walking break on this thing, but I just ran the whole hill thing the day before. So if I want to keep it easy, it's almost going to require walking breaks on it that I would not normally do.
I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad that you mentioned the fact that you would take walking breaks.
Yeah.
Because I think that people in general are anti-walking breaks or don't want to feel like they should or have to take a walking break. But they look at you, someone that can run a marathon in like 2.5 hours, essentially, right? And it's like, oh, Kevin doesn't ever have to walk. I bet Kevin never has to deal with this.
The steep uphill, or especially, this is what gets me. I'm not used to running downhills. Downhills on rocky trails. And California has some well-groomed trails, but there's a couple spots on different trails by my parents that is fairly steep downhill and rutted and rocky. And it's like, all right, I could run this, but my muscle memory on how to run this thing downhill is fading. So I'm going to take it real slow. I'm going to walk this section of it so that I don't do something stupid and take, you know, somersault down the hill. That seems like a terrible idea.
Or twist your ankle and then you can't run the rest of the week we're there.
Yes.
Right. Because you're so excited that, like, oh, I've got these trails. I can't wait to get out there. And then you go out and do something stupid like I did and throw out my back. And then I couldn't really use the fitness center the rest of the week. And then I was mad at myself. Yeah. Right. And then I'm mad.
Yes. So here's the thing. Your vacation, it's going to lead to a change in plans.
Right.
Maybe it has a huge time restriction that you're not used to. Right. Maybe it has, what's the opposite of restriction? A time expansion?
Abundance.
It has an abundance of time. There you go. So that you've got this extra time and you're like, oh, if I have extra time, I should fill it in.
I should make a longer workout or a longer run just because I have the time available.
And the thing is that you can't. Like you could say, all right, on these few days, I'm going to treat it like an extended training block. And one, your family needs to be on board. That extra time is not just in your head, but it's okay with everybody. Yeah. That your workout is now 60 minutes instead of 30 minutes, an hour and a half instead of 45 minutes, whatever it is. That's fine. But remember the rules of 2. Like you cannot increase your intensity and your volume and your strength. Like it's too much of this and too much of this and too much of that. Right. Pick something.
Pick one. And
expand it. Yeah. Like, oh, I'm going to work out longer than I normally do. Okay, that's fine. But don't also up the intensity and add in new strength training exercises. Oh, look at the fitness center that I don't normally have access to. Great. Definitely don't increase your running volume. Like only so many things can be increased at the same time. Yeah. And I think making that point of everyone needing to be on board and communicating that is really important, because I know sometimes when we went out to your
your parents' house and your sister would come in to visit,
Yep.
we'd be like getting ready for the day. We were going to go to the zoo with the kids, and we'd look around and be like, where is she? Like, where's your sister? And like, oh, she just went out for a run. Well, when did she leave? Oh, like 5 or 10 minutes ago. How long is she going to be gone? I don't know.
I don't know.
Right. And so like here we are just kind of all sitting around waiting for her to get back because we had no idea when she left. We had no idea how long she was going. And then it kind of killed the plans, especially when you have little kids. And like you tell your kids you're going and you're leaving and you're like, sorry, we have to wait. Like being able to communicate what you want to everyone that's involved in your vacation is really important and will lead to just better results all around, like better feelings for everyone.
More enjoyable vacation for everybody involved.
Yes. More joy.
The bigger your group is, the more clear the communication needs to be.
Yes.
And the more flexible you need to be, that not everybody involved in your group needs to be involved with every plan.
Yes, true.
Like if your group is double digits, it's possible that on some days you're going to break into sections, and that's going to be okay also. I think flexibility is super key. Like you want you want planning and flexibility, but I think that the way to get flexibility is to plan ahead of time.
I completely agree. So speaking of plans,
that sounds like you said that. That is not my kind of statement. That is 100% your words.
Which is like, I completely agree. Oh goodness.
Good thing we got that recorded.
That I agree with you, or that you say
that I actually said that. The way to create flexibility is to increase your structure. That's what I'm going with.
Structure is extremely important. Like, and that's the thing that I think that people often miss is that they think that having structure and having a training plan is going to limit their freedom. And it's the exact opposite.
Yep.
Like having structure and having a plan actually gives you more freedom because, hey, you don't have to figure out what the heck you're doing.
Yep.
You just have to figure out where to fit it in.
Yep.
Right. And kind of going back to this flexibility and having this training plan, just because you have a training plan doesn't mean you have to rigidly follow that training plan every single day.
True.
So you have to decide, again, going back to these conscious decisions that you have to make. Are you going to stick with your schedule? Or maybe like you can adjust the timing, right? Like, are you going to try to do everything on your training plan, depending on, again, who you're with, what your plans are, what is available to you, all of those things, right? Are you going to try to stick to that schedule? Or are you going to adjust your schedule to try to fit the vacation?
Yes. Yes. Which one is the priority? And I think this really depends. And that's why we started with, you need a clear goal for your vacation.
Yes.
If the goal is consistency, then you might want to adjust the schedule towards the vacation and be like, look, I'm going to maintain some general consistency over the course of the vacation. That's great. If you have a race 3 weeks after your vacation, you might want to stick with some actual like rigidity to your schedule, or take away the goal time, the goal result of the race, and be like, I'm going to enjoy that race because this vacation is 3 weeks before it. And there's no way I'm sticking to a schedule that's just not going to happen.
Right. Because if you decide that you want to kind of be more flexible and be more freeform on vacation and not stick to that training plan, then if you do that and kind of like get in what you can on vacation and, are kind of whatever about it, but then you're mad that you don't hit your goal time at that race. Well, there's a good reason for it.
Yep.
Right. Like there's a good reason that if you miss an entire week of training or get in very little training a couple of weeks before your race, there's probably a reason that your race didn't go that well.
Right. Especially you're training at like a fairly high level and then you pull back drastically like 3 to 4 weeks ahead. It's completely throwing off how your body's trying to taper for that race because it thinks that you did taper and then you're back up and then you're trying to re-taper. It's just an awkward way to try and work the whole thing. It's trying to race with multiple race goals over a short time period. It's tricky and it needs some clear scheduling and what the plan is.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to aim for the vacation, it's best if the goal is something like my overall fitness, some general consistency, or it's a shorter vacation. And you're like, all right, I'm just not going to run over these few days and then I'll get back into it when I get back into it.
And also when we talk about scheduling and trying to do things consciously, planning a week vacation 2 weeks before your race, where it's going to be hard for you to stick to your schedule, might not be a great idea. Right? Like schedule that vacation with that race in mind if that race is important to you. If the race isn't that important to you, if you're just kind of going out and having fun and you don't care about your time, then you can do whatever you want, right?
If it's a fun race, I just want to feel great. I want to enjoy the experience. You can totally do that because you can keep your general fitness up through vacation.
Yep. But we also talk about knowing what you want to sacrifice because of your priorities, right? So if your priority is to hit a Boston qualifying time or a PR in an upcoming race, there are times that you're going to have to sacrifice other areas of your life for that goal. And you shouldn't have to sacrifice everything and you shouldn't have to sacrifice at all times, but sometimes temporary sacrifices are necessary for you to hit a goal that is very important to you.
Yeah.
No, and that goes in everything, in like any kind of goal you have, right? We're not just talking about running. Like there are sometimes if you have goals in other areas of your life, you're going to have to sacrifice in, areas that are not that.
Every area
in other areas, right? Like, so sometimes that's just what goals require.
Right. And sometimes it requires some sacrifice of other people within your family. And that's why the communication of this is what I'd like to accomplish fitness wise during the vacation needs to be clear across the board. If you've got multiple people in the group that are all looking to accomplish different fitness goals, everybody needs to be on the same page. Maybe like say you and I go on vacation together. If your plan is I'm going to fit in what I can and prioritize the vacation. And my plan is I'm hitting this schedule and we'll deal with the vacation as best as possible. That might not work.
Right. And I think that that's a part of why I thought you were lying when we were in Georgia, because I was still planning on running and I was still trying to figure out how I was going to get some of my runs in. I hadn't completely accepted that my running plan was kind of out the window. I was still trying to figure it out. So I was like, well, clearly you're going to feel the same way. Right. But in this instance, it wasn't that way, even though I decided I was going to adjust my running. I was going to run less than I was normally planning on running because we were going to be hiking on top of it.
Yes, that's true.
But again, going back to that open communication, I expected to go on like 7-mile hikes, and the family wasn't necessarily on board with that because I didn't communicate that ahead of time.
Yeah, those were some good hikes. You're like, no. If we around this turn, there's a waterfall. I believe that was the theme of that vacation.
To go find the waterfalls,
but the waterfall was 4 miles from the trailhead, and it was not a loop.
Right.
It was an out and back. So if you got to the waterfall, you had hiked 4 miles, and we had. It
was 2020.
So the older one was 10.
Yeah. And so the younger one was 7.
Yeah. So an 8-mile hike seemed a bit ambitious.
But to me, it was walking, right? Like I think me as a Floridian, I don't understand how intense hikes are. I don't, right? Like, so I'm just like, well, it's just walking. Like the girls can walk for a couple of hours.
And to the 7-year-old, it was not walking.
It's not.
It was a death march, and it was not okay.
that one trail, that I think that was the first one, right? Where we were on that more narrow path, and it was a pretty steep incline for the first like half a mile.
There were a couple of hikes that were the first one was poorly planned.
I thought it was super fun.
I think we recovered after that, found places where it's like, all right, we could hike for a little bit, and then here's a spot where we are literally it's designed to stop, and then we can picnic, and it was fine. Right,
but again, this goes back to my expectations. I didn't clearly communicate, because if I would have communicated that, I'm sure would have been like, Ange, that's not a good idea. And I'm like, no, it'd be fine. Like I just thought we were going to go hike for a few hours every day, because what else are we going to do? Like, so that was just like in my mind, that was what was going to happen. It didn't matter how long it took. It didn't matter if we needed to stop and take breaks, but the girls were just, especially the little one, she was like, this is not.
Her plan was to play board games for a couple of hours.
That's true.
Your plan was to hike for a couple of hours.
Right.
You can't do those simultaneously, but neither of you had communicated directly to the other.
We did not.
So,
and we figured it out, like
we made it work, and it was a great vacation. Here's the thing. It was still an amazing vacation.
All of us still talk about that vacation, of how awesome it was and how much fun we had. And it was just so great just to be a family, the 4 of us, like spending so much great time together.
Looking back on it, it's comical. And it's where so many of these tips come from man, communication seems vital, because looking back, it's hysterical, but it would have had such less issues throughout the whole thing If we just talked.
Yep.
We just talked. And we were in the car for hours. We all could have talked.
10 and a half.
Yes.
10 and a half hours drive.
Many hours.
So it was fun though. But okay, so that's a little bit about understanding that you are probably going to have a change of plans in some respect, right?
Yep.
Even that maybe you stick to your training plan exactly. Even so, the location might change. That location change might lead to a change in weather. So you might need last week's episode where we talk about how to run in the heat and humidity, because if you're coming from a northern state going to a southern state and you're trying to get in the same runs at the same pace, that is not going to work.
Oh yeah, no, family Disney vacation completely changes your plans because suddenly Angie wanted to go hike in the mountains for 2 to 3 hours a day. If you're doing Disney World, you're literally walking 10 to 12 miles a day.
Yeah.
And standing in lines and eating probably not the food that you're used to eating.
Right.
And paying $45 for a hamburger that's shaped like Mickey's head, which is fine and glorious, but trying to then increase your training load on top of that, to maintain your training load on top of that,
or to not realize what effect that has on your training load.
Exactly.
Right. Like to just say, oh yeah, I'll just get in my run and then I'll also go do Disney, or we'll do Disney and then I'll get in my run afterwards. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Especially if you're holding kids for fireworks at 9 p.m. at night as ice cream drips on your head. You don't know anything about that, do
Not you? At all.
So, all right.
All right. So that's changing plans.
Yes.
Sometimes it's completely fine to just take a break from running for your vacation.
Did you hear that from running coaches? Yes, you did. You just heard us say, sometimes when you go on vacation, it's completely fine for you not to run. Was that a pause for emphasis?
Yeah, pause for emphasis. When you take like a full week off, you cannot come back the next week as though nothing happened.
Right.
But it does not take you as long to come back as you might think. You could probably come back, depending on your volume, you could probably come back at like 50 to 75% for like a week, be it like halfway for a week. And then you can basically be back at normal. You have like your vacation week, a down week, and then roughly back to normal, listening to your body every day.
Right.
Maybe it takes 2 weeks to come back.
So you don't want to just jump right back into your plan.
No.
Right. That's the key. Like if you choose, I'm going to take this week off, I'm not going to work out. If I get something in, great. If not, whatever, I'm just going to take the week off. Don't then come home and jump right back into your training plan exactly where it is.
Right. But you could jump back in essentially 2 weeks later. So let's say that you're doing 30 miles a week, round number, 30 miles a week, you come back, you're on vacation, you hit 30 miles a week, you hit 0 miles a week, you come back, you're going to be somewhere between 15 and 20. And then the week after that, you could be back at 30 and your body is going to be like, oh yeah, okay, this is fine.
Right.
Like the first longer run might be like, whoo, we are out here for a while, but you're going to be fine. You're probably more mentally going to be like, wow, this is taking a long time than physically actually uncomfortable and not able to handle it.
Right. And like we said before, if you're stressing about the time off, that is not going to help you get in shape any faster or make your vacation more enjoyable. Make that choice consciously. If you're going to take the time off, take the time off. Don't sit and stew, right? Don't be mad at yourself. Don't be mad at your family or your friends or whoever you're with. Just decide, okay, you know what? I'm going to take this week off. I'm going to adjust my plan next week. Everything is going to be fine. I have plenty of time until my race. I have plenty of time to make this up. Nothing is going to be bad here unless, again, if your goal race is 2 weeks after your vacation, that might not be what exactly you want to do there. But even so, stressing about it is not going to help you in any way. Right. Say you were planning on taking that week and you were going to stick to your fitness schedule and then life happens. You hurt your back because you did too many darn kettlebell swings with a heavy weight and you end up, even though you were planning on getting in your workouts, you end up not working out at all. If you're there getting mad at yourself, if I would have just, and you know, I'm saying this in retrospect, I was mad at myself. I was annoyed because I'm like, gosh darn it, Angie, like seriously, like I was like, I can't believe I did that.
That's
like,
actually how mad she was. She actually said, gosh darn it. She came over to me, I'm trucking along on the treadmill and she goes, gosh darn it, I hurt myself doing kettlebell swings. And I said, well, gee willikers, Ange.
And we're back in the 50s. So, but adding that extra stress.
You're not even sure where to go with that.
And annoyance, right, isn't going to help you in any way. It's, again, being aware of what happened, accepting it for what it is, and then deciding how you want to move forward consciously.
Yeah. Adding stress is not going to fix anything.
Right.
Like adding stress literally does not help anything. It's just going to make the process worse.
Yeah.
If anything, stressing about being out of shape is going to slow down the ability to get back into shape.
Because it will slow down your recovery.
Right.
Right. Because like we said, stress is stress. Yep. So if you are putting mental stress on yourself, thinking about how out of shape you are, it's actually going to take you longer to recover.
Yep.
And like you probably know from this podcast, if you've been listening for any length of time, during workouts, you break your body down. During rest and recovery, you build your body back up. So if you increase the mental stress during your rest and recovery, you're not building back up as strong as you could be if you just decide, okay, you know what? I'm going to accept it. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm not going to try to fit in extra workouts. I'm not going to try to quote unquote make these things up, right?
Yep.
That's
a good one.
Do not, if you miss a week of training, do not try to make that up the following week. Like we're telling you, come in at less than what you were doing, right? And there are some people that make that mistake of like, well, now I have 5 runs I have to make up. I'm going to try to fit them in.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a marathon plan. I missed my 10-mile long run. So
don't do it.
I'll divvy up that 10-mile run over my,
talk about that.
Right? Like I missed my long run. Mm-hmm. So if I just add like 2 to 3 miles on each of my runs next week, that's like the same thing, right? No. 1, it's not a long run in the first place. And 2, you've massively increased the length of every run. If you're used to doing like a 3 or 4 mile and now
even a 5 or 6.
Sure. Okay. So it's a 5 mile. Now all of your 5s have turned into 8s. That is nowhere near a safe increase in volume. That's a safe increase for like 2 days and then to pull back and have an entire recovery week. So that shouldn't be your week of trying to come back from vacation. Like that's a dangerous plan. Stick with come back gentle and then get back to normal and then progress from there. And it's a 3 weeks before you can be progressing. You've got your vacation week, pullback week, normal week, and you're back to increasing volume.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Now we want to talk about schedule changes that are connected to school kids. So if you have kids that are still in school, that still go to traditional school that is, 8 to 3 or whatever it is, and all of a sudden it's summertime, things are going to change because maybe your kids are in camp. Even if they're in camp, those hours are probably going to be different than normal school hours.
Yep.
So you might be running later than normal. Maybe you decide, like I do, yay, my kids don't have to start so early. I'm going to sleep in a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And that's great because I'm getting more sleep, which is going to improve my recovery.
That's fantastic.
However, I know that I can't run too late because it just gets too darn hot.
Yeah. So in theory, your extra sleep suggests that you could, in fact, increase your training load over the summer because you're able to get more sleep because you're sleeping a little bit later. But if you sleep later, it's just going to be hotter, which means you might have to actually decrease your training load. Or if you are increasing, be very gentle and gradual about increasing your training load. Right.
Or if you are increasing your load, well, say, when we talk about load, we talk about both distance and intensity. That's kind of what makes up load. So if I want to increase my mileage and my distance, I need to decrease my intensity. So maybe I need to take more walking breaks.
Sure.
In order to make sure that intensity doesn't go up because the heat is automatically going to increase the intensity of my workouts.
Yes.
So to make sure that my training load doesn't get too high, if I want to ramp up my mileage, like say you are someone that's training for the Chicago Marathon in October, you're going to have to start doing some long runs during the summer, like July, August. I know in my running group down here in South Florida, people that train for the Chicago Marathon always curse themselves in like August.
You had one year that you had so many friends in Chicago.
I know.
The long run group just hated themselves.
They hated themselves. They're like, why did I ever think this was a good idea? How did I not realize that I was going to be doing my 20-miler in September, in South Florida? It was just brutal for them. But again, then they went to Chicago, kind of like we talked about last week about the adaptations that their body made.
They were heat adapted for that thing.
So they actually had made so many good adaptations. When they went to Chicago that year, it was like perfect. It was like 50 or 60 degrees. They crushed it. You know, like they did awesome in the marathon.
Yeah, which is fine as long as you take into account the changes in weather.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Take into account the changes in weather. Don't ignore the changes in the world around you.
Oh, that just made me think of the Jimmy Buffett song, like changes in attitude, changes in latitude,
changes in attitude,
right? Which is exactly appropriate for this episode. Maybe I should sing again.
As long as we're singing as much as possible. I know that song much better than I know the songs of anything.
Because when you take a vacation, you might be going somewhere. It's changes in latitude.
Yes.
So you need to change your attitude around your fitness and your running.
Excellent.
You're welcome. Now you have another song stuck in your head.
All right. Other possible schedule changes connected to school kids. Maybe you take a similar approach as we do over the summer. It's summer vacation. Let's let the kids stay up just a little bit later. It'll be fine because they can sleep in.
This is the worst idea. Like, who thinks that this is a good idea?
You did.
I know, because our kids are at the age now. Our kids are 10 and 13. And so they're at the age where they want to stay up later. And
and there's actually stuff on TV that's not super inappropriate for them to still be watching.
Right. And the problem that Kevin and I are running into is that we like to go to bed now
for them,
for our children. Like we like to try to get in bed like 9:30, 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is really what we try to set for ourselves. But we're starting to get ready around 9:30. We have to take the dog for a walk. We have to kind of lock the house up and do all the things that we do every night. And it's like, if we're letting the kids stay up till 9:30 or the older one till 10 o'clock.
Yeah, when you told the older one she could stay up till 10, I almost threw something. I'm not going to lie.
As long as it wasn't at me.
There was not necessarily clear communication before that was expressed.
Angie, did you not think about that? And I was like, clearly no. Sometimes I speak before I think things through.
All right. So here's the thing. Here's how it directly connects to your running. If you're staying up later, it's the opposite of sleeping in. You might actually be reducing your sleep.
Right.
Maybe you have a dog that doesn't realize the difference between normal school and summer vacation. So the dog wakes up at normal time. If you're staying up later, you've now just shrunk down your sleeping window.
Yep.
So this is one, you're staying up later. It's throwing off your sleep schedule. And maybe you're actually just sleeping less. Both of these are going to make the ability to make physical adaptations more difficult.
Right.
So anything that you're doing that is adjusting your schedule towards the negative, keep that in mind. The one that I did not even realize, it's not even on the outline here because it didn't occur to me until after I wrote this. I used to run my normal schedule. I would eat lunch at 11:20 because that's lunch at my school.
Yeah.
But now I'm completely in control of my own lunch with my summer school. So lunch is around noon. Well, that 45-minute difference means if I'm running after school, if I'm running when I get home, I need to push back my run further, or I'm super physically uncomfortable in my stomach. Like I got GI issues on my first run out during summer school. I'm like, why is this? Like, this is when I would normally run. It's kind of hot, but I don't think that's the issue. And then I'm like, oh, I haven't digested lunch fully.
Which is actually good training for your ultra.
I know. That's what I told myself the entire time as I was like slogging along, grabbing at my side, being like, this is super uncomfortable. Maybe I could use that porta potty at the construction site. Well, which is also a good question.
There you go.
Can you use a porta potty at a construction site?
That's a very good question.
I think we both have decided the answer is yes.
I think the answer is yes, but you have to make sure that there's toilet paper and maybe not. Maybe you don't care about that kind of thing. But here's another question then, talking about making choices consciously.
Sure.
You just said that you were fully in control of when you take lunch.
Yes.
So instead of choosing to have lunch at 12, could you just choose to have lunch at 11:20 when you normally have it?
Yes, I could.
There you go.
Yes, I could. I can completely
problem solve.
Yes, I can move the schedule up. But okay, this is a trick that I learned when I was one of my first jobs. I was still in college. I was working the bookstore over Christmas vacation. We were allowed a lunch break and another break. And we learned, because I was working with my sister at the time, we learned that the later in the day you take that second break, like if I take a break and then I only have to come back and work for like 45 more minutes, I can glide into the end of the day. And so I take lunch at noon because when we come back from lunch, there's just not that much time left before the end of the day.
Then you have less on the back end than you did on the front end.
Yeah, and the kids are fried by that time. So
it's like mile 10 of a half marathon.
Yes.
Or mile 20 something of a full.
Yes. So for the sake of the kids being able to keep their focus, I put lunch when I think it works best for their mental capacity and mine.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, but that's again, that's putting priorities. I prioritize the kids being able to actually learn some geometry and all of us not going insane over the course of these 5 weeks.
Again, priorities and conscious choice.
Yep.
Right. And so we hope that this episode has you thinking about things, because that's the whole point, right? We want you to think about, okay, how is summer break or summer vacation or whatever's happening this summer? How is that going to affect my running? How do I want it to affect my running? What am I okay with? What am I not okay with? And just, again, put that intention into your training. Make those decisions ahead of time as much as possible, right?
And share them with those around you.
As much as possible, yes. And understand things might come up and it's going to be okay. You are not going to lose all of your fitness if you miss some training. Everything is not lost. You are not in worse shape. If your VO2 max decreases over the summer, it's going to be okay. Everything is going to be fine. Okay. But when you train with intention and with purpose, it just makes things a lot more enjoyable and a lot less stressful in general. So go out there and train with intention this summer. And if you found this episode helpful, feel free to share it with a friend or share it on social media. You can take a screenshot of your phone right now, whatever you're listening to this on, and then post that up on your social media story on Instagram. That's where we're the most active. And if you tag us in that post, we will reshare and say thank you, because we really appreciate all of you guys sharing this podcast with your friends so that we can help more runners to be physically and mentally stronger and to go out there and run their lives. So as always, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us. This has been the Real Life Runners podcast, episode number 311. Now get out there and run your life.